Okay. Hey folks, my name is Jen, and today we are going to talk about my worst reads of 2022. So like I previously mentioned in my best reads video, this year was good for reads for me. I think I read about like 100 books, but it was also kind of a weird year. Now, the last couple of years I have had, I think I tried to keep it at like my top 10 best and worst for the past couple of years, but as far as this year, 2022 went basically, I couldn't really do that. I had 9 top books of the year because I honestly wasn't enthusiastic about anything else enough to make it a solid 10, so I went for 9 instead because those are the books that brought me the most joy this year. And as for worst books, I have a few honorable mentions, and then I only have 5 books that either disappointed me greatly or overall frustrated me this year. Every other thing that I read this year, even if the particular books were like pretty okay, I just wasn't over enthusiastic about everything. Let's talk about the honorable mentions on my worst reads first and foremost. So first up, we have the books that I DNF'd this year. And I DNF'd several. So the first that I DNF'd this year was To the Lighthouse by Virginia Woolf. I just did not really enjoy the writing style. It's kind of a stream of consciousness thing, and honestly that's not something that I'm super into. I have a really hard time caring and reading books that are written that way, so I DNF'd it. I then DNF'd The Human Abstract by Elizabeth Willis, which is a collection of poetry that felt like I needed to have written a dissertation on these poems to be able to understand and decipher what in the hell they were talking about. And I enjoy poetry, and I have taken classes having to do with poetry, but college was a long time ago, and I don't want to have to academically break down a poetry book in my spare time. It's just not something that I want. I read poetry to feel something, and I read poetry to entertain myself. I don't really care about superior messages. Is that what I mean? I don't know. It was too hard to decipher, and so I gave up on it. I also gave up on Hidden by Fern Michaels because of the writing, which was not my cup of tea, and basically committed a couple of writing sins for me, so that was a no. I also unfortunately gave up on Hidden Figures by Margot Lee Shetterly and The Canterbury Tales by Chaucer because they were both incredibly dry and boring. Canterbury Tales was, again, hard to decipher, so I couldn't find any humor in it, which was something that I was told it was very funny, and I didn't find anything funny about it. And yeah, Hidden Figures, I wanted to read about the subject a lot, but it just read like a textbook and was so damn boring, I just could not make my way through it. Another disappointing DNF was The Maid by Nita Prose. I did not like the main character, and I did not like the writing style. I Will Survive and The Dane Diaries, both by Kristen Kemp. I DNF'd both of those because, again, of the writing style. It was more something that I was into when I was in high school, and I'm just a different person now than I was at 15, and I just don't like the writing style or the stories anymore. The Long Fall by Walter Mosley. I hated the main character, and so I didn't want to stick around to read any more of it. Dead Dead Girls by Nikisa Afia. It was, again, the writing style that I had objections to. Kiss Me Kill Me by Lauren Henderson. Again, writing style, and I just didn't care. I just didn't care about any of the characters, and I couldn't figure out how to care about any of them. Kissing Christmas Goodbye by M.C. Beaton and Dashing Through the Snow by Mary Higgins Clark and Carol Higgins Clark were both DNFs for me because, again, of writing. They were... It felt like they were leaning towards Hallmark Christmas movie writing, and I don't like Hallmark Christmas movies, so I don't like holiday books that read like them. So, yeah. And then the last one that was a DNF disappointment was Seducing Mr. Darcy by Gwen Creedy. This was a book that I previously had really liked, but I hadn't picked it up in several years. I tried to give it a reread, and there is something that happens with one of the characters in there that is personally very upsetting with me, and I just couldn't. So, yeah. As for books that I read that are on my honorable mentions of kind of worst, and I feel like really bad about listing this even as like an honorable mention, but it kind of put a damper on the series, and it kind of put a damper on like my whole month when I read this, and that is Empty Smiles by Catherine Arden. This is book 4 and like the final book in the Small Spaces Quartet. This is a series that I really loved and really enjoyed. I haven't liked the other books as much as I liked the first volume, but I still like really enjoyed them, was really invested in all the characters, really liked all of them, liked the spooky elements, and was very creeped out at times by the spooky elements, especially this one. Like, this one has like clowns in it, and it was just, I was not okay for a portion, but like that's okay because that's what I like these books for. They're middle grade, but they creeped me the hell out, and that's something I really enjoyed, but unfortunately the ending just kind of killed it for me. The ending felt extremely anticlimactic and rushed, and just like not what I would have expected at the end of a really good 4-book series. It almost felt like the author was having a hard time figuring out how to end it, or she ran out of time and her publisher was like, you need to turn it in now, so she turned it in, and it did not... The ending itself was like fine and exactly where I would have expected the ending to go, but the climax, there was no climax. It was basically anticlimactic, like I said. It was just like big things and then things are okay. Like there wasn't that was it. And that was just very disappointing, and I don't know if it's a reflection of because it's a middle grade series, because it almost felt like a Saturday morning cartoon of like, this is gonna be this big thing, but hey, sunshine and rainbows, it's all freaking okay all of a sudden with like a snap of the fingers. And I don't know if it's that, or like I said, maybe she had to hit a deadline and then nothing ever got changed or whatever, but it was just major disappointment, unfortunately, and kind of, like I said, put a damper on like the whole series for me. Okay. Let's get into the top 5 worst, though. Start with the least worst. So one of these I don't have really, because well, I mean I have it, but it's like it's in my donation bag and I don't want to dig through it. So number 5, Digging Up Love by Chandra Bloomberg. So this is a romance novel following two characters, one of which is a girl who lives in a small town and has lived in this small town her whole life pretty much. She desperately wants to escape. She wants to start her own like cookie bakery in the big bad old city, and get away from all of the daily microaggressions that she has to deal with being a black girl living in a small town in the middle of nowhere, raised by white grandparents and surrounded by white people. So she wants to get away from all of that. Dinosaur bones are discovered in her grandparents' backyard when they are digging for a new swimming pool, and in walks the love interest, who is an archaeologist in the big old city. I think it's Chicago, if I remember correctly. Yeah, because he works at the Field Museum, and I'm interested in the Field Museum, because I used to watch like a YouTube channel that like was set there and stuff. Anyway, so this sounded promising because we have archaeology. Well, not archaeology. Archaeology is something I'm fascinated with. Paleontology I'm not as interested in, but I was into dinosaurs as a kid, so I mean I do have a soft spot for it. Yeah, so we have like a paleontologist and we have a baker, and these are two things that are interesting-ish to me, baking more so now. And I thought, well, this is going to be a very cute romance. There were elements that were cute. I really liked all of the grad students that the paleontologist brought with him. Like, I thought that they were really funny and interesting, quirky characters. And I didn't mind a little bit of like the bantery, flirty bits between the two main characters in the beginning, but as their relationship-ish progresses, I just really wasn't feeling it. I mean, they have a little bit of chemistry, but it's basically overridden all of the time by their miscommunications. And most of the miscommunications were on her part. She was incredibly freaking immature, which was very frustrating all the time. Like, just very immature. And I almost wanted to, like, reach in there and tell this dude, like, dude, run. It is not worth it. It was just, I don't know, it just felt like a lot of miscommunications, and the majority of them were not needed. It just felt like the author was putting in conflict, and not just like one little conflict, like tons of conflict, because they think that, you know, she thinks that, oh, romance novels have to have a conflict point, but it was like so much conflict. And the other side that really disappointed me and kind of pissed me off, this is a virginal romance. These are two Catholic virgins who don't bone. And that's fine. You know, if people want to write that, read it. You live your truth, man. You read that chaste romance. I am someone that I read romances for the entertainment value, and also because at times they are comforting, because it's almost a standard rule, now there's differences to this, but there's almost a standard rule that there will be a happy ending at the end of this. And sometimes when the world sucks, it's just a comfort read when you know that things are going to work out and everything's going to be okay at the end of the novel. Okay. Besides that, I like to read me some boning, okay? And that might make me like a dirty birdie, but like, I don't like closed door romances. I want to know what is happening. Oftentimes, the scenes are really hilarious to read about because people use the funniest words for private parts ever, and I don't know if it's because they think it's sexy or it's just they're uncomfortable saying words. But a lot of the times they're entertaining, sometimes they're spicy, and it's like, ooh, but I like that element of it. So to have a romance novel that doesn't have any of that in it, disappointing. Very disappointing. It's like reading my grandmother's romantic thrillers or something. Like, I don't want that. I want some high class boning, please and thank you. And I know that there are books out there that have things marked as like, this is a closed door romance. I didn't see any marks or mention in this book whatsoever that it was going to be a closed door romance, because if that was the case, I would not have bought it and read it, most likely, or even if I had still felt like I wanted to read this book, I wouldn't have been majorly disappointed by the end of it. I don't know if it was the fault of like the publisher, like trying to be sneaky and not let us know that this is a closed door romance on purpose or what, but it just, yeah. Like those elements, the ridiculous amount of conflict and the no boning and being sneaky about not letting us know that there's no boning in here, makes it number 5 of the worst on my list, because I just feel like I wasted my time. That might have been a little too harsh. That might have been the one talking. Book number 4 on my list, which is potentially going to be controversial. Because book number 4 is The Little Prince by Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. This book tackles some stuff. Like, it has some really cute and pretty art that I was pretty down with. It tackles some things about childhood and growing up that had me all in my feelings. Very bittersweet. But I was still, like, on board with this. I was still enjoying it. I was, you know, thinking in my head, I can see why this is such a beloved children's classic. I understand why people get, like, Little Prince tattoos and, like, have, you know, a whole big thing about this. Until we get to that's 3/4 of the way through the story. The last quarter, though, changed it. The last quarter made me want to chuck this damn thing across the room. That might be controversial, and I will take into account that this book was written, let me see, 1943? Okay, yes, World War II. I knew it was written during one of the World Wars. This was written during World War II, when people thought the world was ending. And it was written by an author who had gone through a lot, was going through a lot, and stuff like that. So where he was in his life and also where the world was gives context as to how the story came about, how things happened, how it went, how it ended. So I understand that. But me, personally, hated the ending. Was upset, was not okay with it. Not happy, ruined the entire book for me. Personally, I'm not unhauling it because it might be the case of I can revisit this in like 5-10 years and maybe I'll feel differently about it, but at this point in my life, I hate it. If I had read this as a child, I would have been so distraught. I don't even understand fully why the author did what he did. And I don't want to get into spoilers in case anyone hasn't read this, but I know there's probably a point to it, but I just don't know what that point was. And so that's why it's number 4 on here, because it made me really angry and upset. Okay, book number 3, the third worst, was A Man Lay Dead by Niall Marsh. It was my introduction to the world of Niall Marsh, which initially made me pretty nervous about it because it's on my worst reads list. So this is the first Inspector Roderick Allen novel, and he doesn't even come in until later. He's introduced by another character entirely, actually. This takes place at like a manor house. It's rich dudes having like a weekend and like party. And he proposes that everyone play the murder game, and unfortunately during the murder game someone actually gets murdered. In enters Inspector Roderick Allen. There were a couple of reasons why I didn't really enjoy this book. First and foremost was the fact that I couldn't really figure out what the heck type of a person Roderick Allen was. As a person, as a character, as a detective. He was really confusing, and I think a large part of that was possibly because the author herself maybe didn't really know what type of person the detective he was at the time. This was like the first novel she wrote with him in it. I think this might have also been her first novel in general. Don't quote me on that because I could be wrong, but it just felt like she didn't really know who he was, so then we couldn't really know who he was, and that was pretty frustrating because I didn't really know how to take him. Is he supposed to be like a funny haha guy? Is he cold-blooded? Is he, you know, you couldn't really figure him out, and that was a large part of what made this not enjoyable for me. There were also a couple of elements of like just secret brotherhood stuff that, first of all, like, why was this a subplot in here? It's really dumb. And second of all, I don't really know too much about this brotherhood or whatever, but I'm almost fairly certain that the stuff mentioned in here is probably slander of the time against them, potentially. So that felt kind of sleazy to have that in here too. I don't know. It dated it. A lot of things dated this in an uncomfortable way, and yeah, this wasn't a good introduction for the characters or her writing for me. That has changed as I've read, like, another version. I've read number 8 in the series, and that was awesome, and I'm currently reading, I think it's number 12 in the series, and it's not too bad so far, so maybe it's just debut novel jitters, debut novel problems, perhaps, I don't know. But yeah, just not a good introduction in general. Alright, number 2, second worst book that I read was a reread. That was Angels and Demons by Dan Brown. This is the first Robert Langdon novel, I believe, and it sees Robert Langdon hurriedly rushed off to, firstly, CERN, to witness a body strategically placed in a certain way that has to do with like religious symbology and artwork, and Robert Langdon's a symbologist. So he's pulled there to kind of investigate and then realize that there's like a deeper terrorist plot at play, and this group wants to blow up the Vatican, essentially, so him and this scientist have to go run off and save the day because, you know, religious symbology can defeat crazy people, obviously. So, I loved this shit as a teenager. I read the Da Vinci Code first. I read this one second. It is partially water damaged because I read it when I was outside in a rainstorm. I mean, I was under umbrellas, but there was rain everywhere because I couldn't put this damn book down because I wanted to know what happened. I was just sucked in. And there are elements of this that make it a page turner. It's a thriller. You feel like you need to get through it. And I will say that Dan Brown is very good at making you want to know what's going to happen next. The problem that I had overall with this was, first and foremost, Dan Brown choosing to make a terrorist character of Arab descent because it's frickin' Dan Brown, and this was written in, when was this? 2000? First of all, that's kind of problematic. Second of all, dude, how fucking unimaginative are you? For realsies. So that's point one of contention. The other point that really frustrated me about this was, like, you can tell that Dan Brown did, like, his research into everything, and he knows some shit, but his way of describing and expressing it, it just made Robert Langdon sound really superior and arrogant the whole time. Like he just has to be the smartest person in the room. And that got really old really fast, and this is a chunker. So I was just really sick of his shit by the end of this book. Like, yes, okay, he's a very intelligent person, but he is not the smartest person in the room. But he constantly, it just feels like he needs to act that he is. It's just so freaking arrogant, and I don't know. In some ways, I almost wonder if Dan Brown has him as like a slight self-insert or something. Not to like slander him directly in that case, but it's just something that I wonder. I was really frustrated with this, which is disappointing because it's something that I really enjoyed when I was younger, and I don't know, it makes me scared to ever reread the Da Vinci Code because I feel like maybe that will also piss me off, and I don't want to reread it because I'd rather keep in my memory how much I enjoyed that book as a teenager. So yeah. And then we have the worst book that I read in 2022, and that was Beauty and the Beast by Barbara Hambly. So this is, again, another chaste romance. No, this is a book that, you know, you might be asking yourself, what the hell is this? Why is this so terrible? This is a novelization of a short-lived 1980s romantic drama take on Beauty and the Beast. It's a novelization of it. Now, I have watched the first episode of this series to try to understand what was happening. I read this like years ago and didn't mind it that much, I don't think, at the time. I pretty much forgot everything that happened in here. So I decided to reread this in like January, I think. I should have just not. It was basically, I think, encapsulated all the worst parts of the 80s. We have ultra-consumerism and capitalism. We have shit-heel male characters who just get away with being shit-heels because they're rich and influential, and they think they can treat their dates however they want and be controlling and tell women who they can hang out with, and women respond by, instead of dumping the asshole on the spot or punching him in the face or throwing a drink on him, the response is to leave and figure, well, I'll call him later. No, bitch, you don't call him later. You tell him he's an asshole and you never want to see him again. Okay, that's how you respond. But no, because it's the 80s, we don't do that. We just continue in this ill-gotten freaking relationship, whatever. So, and then we have severe violence by mysterious 2D character gangs. We have a character that's the Beast who's animalistic, but they tried to make him out to be like he's like part lion or something, but I actually think that that's not it at all. I think it's trying to be a take on a specific medical condition that I don't know the name of it, but there's been other movies about people who have had it made, but I think that was their take on it, but of course they got it wrong and made it something it's not, because again, the 80s. Just a couple of other things that frustrated me about this are this character, basically what happens is she leaves this party and her shitty boyfriend walks through Central Park, which is ill-advised, I guess, or is she in Central Park? No, she's grabbed from outside, threatened, people think she's somebody else, and then they slice her up and dump her in Central Park, and this guy finds her and brings her to his underground world where the rejects of the world, again, very 80s, are rejects of New York, basically, are living in the sewer systems that have been built up to create like a community, a safe community where they can all live and be themselves and survive and and all that jazz. I liked the bits about the underground community for the most part. I found it really fascinating, and the way like the whole system worked I was very interested in, and would be interested in learning more about that and how that works, because that was very interesting. It was very like borrower-esque thing for me, which is something I was into as a kid. So like that part of it I enjoyed. But of course when she is horribly maimed with a knife, well, once she goes back to, when she's healed and goes back to civilization again, don't you know, she gets plastic surgery and oh, she's beautiful once again, because we can't have a scarred heroine, apparently, because she's beauty. And it's like, yeah, she can still be beautiful and have like scars from what she went through. I mean, not that there's anything wrong with someone wanting to try to forget what happened to them in a traumatic way, but at the same time it was just like another sign of how rich and privileged that she is and her family is, that she's able to do this and go completely back to normal again. So that was just like another thing that I really didn't like. There's also characters in the underground world where there's a teenage girl and a grown man. Now he's not like old, but he's like 20, and I think she's like 15, 16 or something like that, and he is very much in love with her and interested in her, and she keeps rejecting him and being like, no dude, I'm not into you, and he won't freaking listen and he won't let it go, which is again a very 1980s thing of men not understanding when no means no, and just because I mope around here like it's some kind of romantic comedy again from the 80s, that eventually I'll wear her down and she'll fall in love with me. No, life is not a John Hughes film, okay? It's just not what happens usually at all. So that was icky with the grown-ass man and the teenager. Also icky that he won't take no for an answer. Also icky that the grown people around this boy are like, give her time, she'll come around. It's like, no. She said no. You tell him it's no. Yeah, sorry if I got a little rambly at the end, but this one frustrated me so much, and just, it really is at times so boring, despite the fact that there is so much going on in this novel. And then you also have again just the worst parts of the 80s wrapped up into one novel. And it just, yeah, it just annoyed me a lot. I'm going to like unhaul it because this book was my grandmother's, and I know that this show was something that she liked watching when it was on air back in the 80s. So yeah, but I'm never gonna read it again. So yeah, folks, that was my worst reads of the year. Not too many, well, a lot that I DNF'd and a couple of big disappointments, but for the most part it wasn't too many that like overly frustrated me too much, which was nice, I guess. Know what your worst books of the year were. If you've read any of these, let me know what your thoughts were. I'm sorry if you really loved any of them, but yeah, man, I don't know. Opinions are like nipples and everybody has them, and these are just my opinions on these books. But yeah, thank you so much for watching. Thank you for always watching. If you are new here, you know, please consider subscribing if you would like, and I will see y'all in the next video, which will hopefully be more positive. Alright, bye.